Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country.
Welcome to another edition of Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert. We have a special guest today, a friend of mine, Sarah Eagleheart, who is Lakota. Welcome, Sarah. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, and we are here to talk about your new collective called Indigenous Fashion Collective, and then we'll leave time for you to talk about other things you're working on. But hey, tell our audience about the Indigenous Fashion Collective that was launched last month.
Yeah, so we had a soft launch at the Reservation Economic Summit in Las Vegas, and the Indigenous Fashion Collective is co-founded by Twyla True, Lillian Sparks Robinson, and myself. All of us are actually Lakota, so that might be an interesting arena for us to, take on these Lakota women. We just come up with an idea and we got to run with it.
Well, that's great. And there seems to be a real moment for Indigenous fashion designers. Talk about that.
Yeah, in working with Twyla True, who is an ultra high net worth individual who also happens to be Oglála Lakota. I got to know her when I was CEO of Native Americans in Philanthropy, and she has pulled me from the nonprofit side into the for-profit side as well. And she is just this amazing serial entrepreneur. And, we were always looking at Indigenous peoples and looking for opportunities to support Indigenous peoples. And, she has made had a lot of success with different racial groups. So African American with music, 1500 Sound Academy, and then also through her studio, Volume Studio, which is in Inglewood. It's a 25,000 square foot studio with the top end production, music productions. And they do music with the writers from Bruno Mars, Sweetie, Snoop Dogg. That's 1500 or nothing. And then she also has created Latina brands, Sweet Street and Belladonna, fashion brands actually in Inglewood too, where they've been in Nordstrom and NFL. And then she owns her own fine jewelry line, Twyla True Fine Jewelry, which has a store in Orange County, but also on the Strip in Las Vegas and Resort World. So meeting her and getting to work with her, and then listening to Indian country, working with Lillian as well, in her role from the National Center of the National Center for American Indian Enterprise and Development. And then listening to Twyla, there was just this moment because, we were seeing our friends like Kwana Chasing Horse is a really good friend of mine and also on our advisory board. And then Jamie Schultz, who's also the ED of SWAYA, and they're holding their first Native Fashion Week actually in 2 weeks on May 2nd through the 5th. And so listening to my friends and just always having an interest in fashion, I was listening to them and I said, oh my gosh, you guys are all talking about the same thing. They were all saying that we needed to have support for Indigenous fashion designers and models and photographers and makeup artists. And so that's what's so exciting, because you see models like the CFDA, the Council of Fashion Designers of America, which is a nonprofit organization, and they put on major events like the Met Gala. And so we thought to ourselves, what if we had our own platform? Because places like the CFDA, that's very exclusive areas, and we're not often invited to the table. In fact, there may be only one of us that is on their advisory boards, if at all, right? And so we thought, okay, let's build out a platform where we not only can we provide advocacy, but we can also provide access to manufacturing and to opportunities with brand collaborations as well.
Well, and I saw you at the fashion show at RES, the Economic Development. I was really impressed with the variety of people. And I'm going to say this kindly, it's not all that thin 19-year-old models that we know of models. I was so impressed. There seemed to be varying age groups and, male, female, and different sizes. And that's what any country looks like. We're just being real. And so what, in your opinion, Sarah, what makes Indigenous fashion so unique?
I think what's so great is that so many of the fashion designers are taking traditional models of art and craft making and integrating that into their designs. And so you saw somebody like Norma Flying Horse, who she had traditional beadwork, a fully beaded top that would have been like a fancy dance top, right? Or a traditional top, something like a cape, fully beaded cape. And then she integrated that into a dress design. And then you also have somebody like Kayla Looking Horse, and she's also integrating traditional designs into her dresses. And it's been really fun to see, because many of us, we've been going to fashion shows for a while. You get to see the evolution of fashion and fashion designers. And I think even somebody like Jonte Kam, who's also on the advisory committee for the Indigenous Fashion Collective, his work is just incredible as well, where he takes bustle type of designs and does mask with them, and just has these incredible huge, and then fringes. So it's really exciting to see them taking traditional craft making to just a whole new level.
Yeah, and how do we keep the momentum going? Because I was talking to somebody who actually who's Native American, works for Disney, and she said, after Dancing with Wolves, we had our moment, and we hope the momentum keeps this going this time. And so I guess, in your opinion, how do people like you keep this going? Maybe through this collective?
Yeah, definitely through the collective. I mean, that's why we had to jump into the space the way that we did. We, working with Twyla, she's always looking at the market, and she's like, okay, like, where's the market at? Like, where's the appetite? And so when you see things like Lily Gladstone, winning a Golden Globe and getting nominated for an Oscar, you see Reservation Dogs, and then you see all of these different projects that are coming out with Native storylines, even from like, Amber Midthunder, Prey, and you see Quanah, like literally Quanah, this Alaskan girl who, she's now in Vogue. She was on the side of a building in Los Angeles. She was literally like full size. Yeah, I was like, wow. And so you look at the moment in entertainment, and you see the market out there and what they're looking for. And so we're like, okay, we need to jump in this space and get going like as fast as we can. And so we're really excited because our advisory committee also includes people like Patricia Michaels, who was on Project Runway. She was the first person on Project Runway. Crystal Williams, who is a vice chairwoman from Kushada tribe, and then Cora K. Chandler, who's also a producer.
That is fantastic. And it is a good moment. Hey, tell us what else you're working on. I understand you have a book out.
Yeah, so I do have a book. It's called Warrior Princesses Strike Back, and that's me and my identical twin sister, Emma. So her name is Emma, my name is Sarah, and I'm the older twin. So I'm twin A, and she's twin B. She's a psychotherapist from Oneida. It makes a difference. I'm older by 14 minutes, Levi.
Okay.
And we wrote our book during COVID. I did a lot of stuff during COVID. It was a very productive time for me. I also started Return to the Heart Foundation, which funds Indigenous women-led initiatives. And I wrote this book. And my sister and I, we grew up in Pine Ridge Indian Reservation on the edge near Martin, South Dakota, which is a border town. So our tribal community was a mile outside of the town. And back then, I'll like date myself, but back in the 90s, I was in high school. And they had this whole warrior homecoming thing that they did. And it was a big chief, a medicine man, and 5 warrior princesses. And there was mostly non-native high school at that time. And they put on this drama of where the medicine man would pick a woman. The women would sit there and they would sing a song called Indian Love Song. And then the medicine man would go around and pick one of the women by looking in their mouth, petting them on the head, and then manually lifting them from a cross-legged position into a standing. And it was this whole like drama that was played out to like a tom-tom beat. And then whoever they stood up was the princess. She was the homecoming queen, basically. So my sister and I, when we were 16 years old, we protested at it. And it's, for me, honestly, like that protest really has underlined just everything that I've done in my life. It was really the foundation because I really learned advocacy at this young age of 16. I learned how to, craft messages. And also I was working as a reporter for Indian Country Today at the time. I was a summer intern. So I was like, well, we're doing this protest. Who do I go to? You got to go to the newspapers. You got to go to the radio station. You got to go to Keeley and tell them about everything that was going on. And they came and supported us. It took 4 years, but the school finally stopped that protest. And because our protest just kept getting bigger and bigger, and we kept getting support. And that's the first story in our book. But we wrote the book because we had all of the issues that so many people in Indian country have, when you're growing up on the res, from a mother who lost her memory. Well, she was a tribal police officer for Rosebud Sioux tribe. And we were all in a car accident where we were run off the road by 2 drunk drivers. And she woke up from this car accident and she couldn't remember having children. And so that's one of my earliest memories as a 7-year-old. And wow. I was very fortunate that, we had an extended family, and our extended family really practiced Lakota values. So for us, we were able to have them step in, and, there wasn't a question of, who was going to take us. My mom had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. Our father was never in our lives. And so they were really our parents. And then, we've had all these, my twin sister has had her own issues as well. I mean, she's also a survivor of rape as well. And we said, you know what, we need to talk about these stories, because when we were healing in our 20s, when we figured out what was going on with our mom, because our mom wasn't able to be a mother and she was self-medicating with alcohol and was just not a very stable childhood. We also had really great lessons because we were connected to spirituality and to our traditional ceremonies, that when we got older in our 20s and my sister became a psychotherapist, and then she began diagnosing me, and she began saying, yeah, she did. She was like, Sarah, I think you're codependent. And I was like, no, I'm not. You don't know. And then I'd look it up because I'm an A-type person. I was like, I'd go look it up and find a book. And I was like, oh, maybe I am. And so I would go to self-help books, but none of them were ever written by from an Indigenous feminine voice. And so we thought we need to actually share the stories of our lives. So it's a memoir / personal development book where we talk about growing up on the reservation, and we talk about how what we knew, what helped us to, heal, what we wish we knew. We also say to ourselves, like, we're not perfect. We're not trying to be perfect. Everybody is in their healing process, and you go through that process for, pretty much your whole life, and we have different things that happen to us. But as Indigenous peoples, we don't often talk about it. And a lot of my inspiration is actually Brené Brown, who I read a lot. She talks a lot about shame and how to get to joy. You actually have to come face to face with your shame. And so we're very honest with things that have happened to us. And even, my sister, she was very inspired by Iyanla Vanzant, who's very, very deep writer as well. And everybody talks about their own personal experience from just the depth of that experience. So we shared that in that book. I should also say that I'm very fortunate because I have really great friends in Piper Parabo and Mark Ruffalo, who also endorsed our book, and they wrote really great little blurbs for us as well. But I talk about my work from, working at the Episcopal Church and being an advocate and team leader for social justice, environmental justice, diversity. I did that for 7 years, repudiated the doctrine of discovery, supported also the Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. So I talk a lot about that work and what it was like to work at an organization that was in 16 countries with 2 million members. And then I also go from there to also talking about, relationships. And, I've had my share of failed relationships before I met my partner, Kevin Killer, former president of the Oglála Sioux tribe.
Very good man. Very good man.
He's a good guy. And then, I also talk about what it was like to win an Emmy and the process of that, because I won a daytime Emmy for a virtual reality project called Crow the Legend with John Legend. And so I've been really fortunate to build these really great relationships with influencers who want to uplift and share our stories and advocate and, partner with us. And so that's been a lot of the work that I've been able to do. So yeah, you should read it.
That is a very moving story, especially the part about your mother and you overcoming. And we all know this in Indian country, so many obstacles that so many of our relatives face as Native people. Mm-hmm. So I think your book is something I have not read it. So I want to get a copy and read it. I think it's really necessary. And what message would you give to, and I think the book probably gives a lot of messages, but what one big message would you give to Native youth who may feel we've all heard this for a long time. People can say it's almost cliche, but that feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. What would you tell those Native youth?
Part of what I was very fortunate to have in my life was having a sister, right? So I had somebody that we were constantly reflecting back and forth with each other in our lives. And, things like racism, we grew up in a school that was mostly white at the time. And the racial tension was very high in South Dakota. And so we were always reflecting back to each other like, oh my gosh, did they just say that? We had high school counselors that discouraged us from doing summer programs because they were basically telling us we weren't smart enough to do, like, say, in med, like Indians into medicine, like discouraging us from applying. We both applied anyway, and we did get in, by the way. But I chose to go to the Native American journalism camp instead, but we both got in. So I think that we also were very fortunate to have a grounding in spirituality and with our family. And so having that spirituality foundation was huge. I think oftentimes people don't, many of our communities are in rural areas, and we don't think about how fortunate we are to have that reflection time as well. But we're able to have that space to think and I had that space when I was young to think and to understand myself and to understand intuition. People call that many different things, intuition, right? Some people call it calling, some people, different religions call it different things, but I learned to follow my intuition and my gut and trust it. And so I would have faith if I had an idea, if something came up, 2 or 3 times, I'm like, oh, wow, I feel like I'm supposed to do that, or I'm supposed to follow that direction. I need to maybe go in that direction. And so a lot of what I've done in my life has been because I was following my intuition and had faith that I was going in the right direction. And so even now, I'm working with Twyla True, and honestly, it's just the most exciting stuff I've done in my whole life, because she is really wanting to make a change for tribal communities and bring capital investment to tribes. And that's something that many of our tribes have been missing, is that relationship to capital. And she means business, and she moves fast and she moves quickly. And so it's just so fun to be able to, I also have an MBA, and so utilizing my MBA background in this whole new space of entrepreneurship has been so fun. And so I've been able to create new businesses around storytelling. Storytelling has always been the thread, throughout my career. So I really think that for young people, you just have to find that thing that you love, and it may change, it may shift. I mean, I knew that for myself at a young age. I knew that I liked a lot of different things, which is why I got a degree in communications and then another degree in American Indian Studies. I always knew I was going to be serving my people in that way. But then I got an MBA with a very generic sort of, emphasis, global management, because I thought, you know what, I'm also interested in this world of business. And so it's been so fascinating to just follow the different evolutions of even my own career and be like, oh wow, like I prayed for this. There was a point where I said to myself, I want to be like Twyla True someday. And to now be in that space and to be able to be doing this kind of work with her has been so fun, from storytelling, music, to infrastructure, renewable energy. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and there's so many exciting things in Indian country, and I like what you said about the storytelling, because I say there was a smile on my face. We are all storytellers, whether we like to know it or not. Deep tradition of storytelling among Native Americans, and it's how you hone in on it and make it happen and get that word out. Because there's a discussion now about indigenous knowledge. It's just so profound and so, and we have to thank Deb Haaland, the Secretary of the Interior. She really pushed it at the federal level, and we're getting some recognition now that it's almost unheard of. And so I'm so excited for you, Sarah. You and I met many, many years ago, at least a dozen years ago, and I admire you. I've always admired you, and you are a go-getter, and it's hard to keep up with what you're doing, though. So I'm glad you came on Native Bidaské today. So Miigwech, and we want to get you and Twyla in back, and as you as the Indigenous Fashion Collective develops, and I think you're working on a gala for this November, so definitely want to get you back, and we can talk about that further. So Miigwech, anything else you want to say before we leave?
Yeah, we're going to be at Swaya Native Fashion Week with the activation booth. So we're going to be recruiting our Indigenous membership there. So you can be sure to find us there outside all the fashion show. Okay.
And to our viewers, Miigwech, get Sarah's book, Warrior Princesses Strike Back, and we'll put details of how you can get the book up on the screen. But tune in next week again to another edition of Native Bidaské. As you've heard me say before, this is election year. If you're not registered, get registered to vote. This is a very critical election. You'll be hearing me talk about it from now until November. So Miigwech, we'll see you next week. Be safe.
If you appreciate what we do here at Native News Online, we invite you to donate to support our continued work covering Indian country. You can scan this code with your smartphone or go to the link located below this video to donate today. We greatly appreciate your support. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and be sure to scan this code or go to the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of Native Bidaské. Miigwech.